Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Russia's Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State Rubio hold talks on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit after extended meeting on the Ukraine conflict. Rubio also meets Wang Yi at the ASEAN summit amid U.S.-China tensions. Trump and Xi talks are also likely. Details awaited. U.S. President Trump unveils sweeping tariffs, 50% on Brazil, 35% on Canada, and up to 20% on global trade partners. South Korea, U.S., Japan hold high-level military talks in Seoul. Also stage joint air drill. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held talks on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit, the foreign ministers meeting, in fact, in Malaysia. Lavrov and Rubio, they had a brief informal, it's a standing conversation in Kuala Lumpur, and their talks followed a 50-minute meeting between the two of them on Thursday. Lavrov said that he outlined Putin's position on settling the Ukraine war during that meeting with Rubio.
We discussed with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio the Ukraine crisis, and we reaffirmed our position stated by President Putin. And he reiterated this position once again during the phone call with President Trump on July 3rd.
Russia is awaiting a major statement from the U.S. President Donald Trump, which is expected on Monday, as confirmed by the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov.
We are waiting for the statement itself so that we can understand what President Trump meant. We carefully monitor all the details in the comments of the U.S. leader.
Trump, speaking to NBC News, did not disclose details of the statement, but has recently voiced frustration with the Russian President Vladimir Putin over the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The announcement coincides with new NATO weapons deliveries to Ukraine, which Peskov dismissed as just business, noting Kiev's poor receipt of arms. The statement's content remains unclear, but it could signal a shift in U.S. policy or rhetoric towards Russia, potentially impacting diplomatic relations or the ongoing conflict. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has said that the United States would supply weapons to Ukraine via NATO. In recent days, Trump has expressed frustration with the Russian President Vladimir Putin over the lack of progress towards ending this conflict. Trump also said that he was talking about what he called a new deal between the U.S., NATO allies and Ukraine over weapons shipment from the United States. Sources said for the first time since returning to office, Trump will send weapons to Kiev under a presidential power frequently used by his predecessor. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia in a first in-person meeting between the two leaders since President Donald Trump's return to office. Describing his meeting with Wang Yi as constructive, the top U.S. diplomat said that the two sides still have some issues to resolve. Further, Rubio also said that there was high probability that President Donald Trump and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping will meet, but no date has been discussed. The meeting comes amid escalating friction globally over Trump's trade policies, with China this week warning the United States against reinstating hefty levies on its goods next month.
Areas of potential cooperation. I thought it was a very constructive, positive meeting and a lot of work to do. Obviously there are some issues we're going to have to work through, and that's to be expected with countries of our size and scope and influence in the world, two global powers such as the United States and China.
Regional trade and security issues dominated the meeting between ASEAN diplomats and senior officials from the European Union and the United Kingdom in Kuala Lumpur. European Foreign Policy Chief called for a boost in cooperation on trade.
In the face of the renewed protectionism, we boost our cooperation on trade and defend the rules-based, non-discriminatory, open, fair, inclusive, equitable and transparent trading system with the World Trade Organization at its core.
Well, Brunei's foreign minister expressed concern over growing geo-economic uncertainties and said that progress was better sustained through upholding international rules and multilateralism.
As two of the world's successful organizations in regional integration, we understand that progress is better sustained through mutual respect and shared commitment to upholding international rules and promoting multilateralism. Amidst growing geo-economic uncertainties, including rising protectionism and tariff barriers, an ASEAN-EU FTA agreement is even more timely. It would reaffirm our collective commitment to an open, rules-based multilateral trading system.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Thursday announced a 35% tariff on imports from Canada next month and planned to impose blanket tariffs of 15 to 20% on most other trade partners. In a letter which was released on his social media platform, Donald Trump told Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney the new rate would go into effect on August 1 and would go up if Canada retaliates. Now, the new U.S. tariff will apply to Canadian imports. The President Trump, he said that it was a response to Canadian retaliation and persistent trade barriers. In a letter released on Thursday evening, he accused Canada of failing to cooperate on major issues, especially the flow of fentanyl into the United States. President Trump linked Canada's role in fentanyl trafficking to new tariffs and warned of further duties if Ottawa retaliates. Now, Canada remains the U.S.'s second biggest trading partner and also the top buyer of American exports. The U.S. has notified 22 nations of updated tariffs, including a 50% rate on Brazilian imports. And responding to the new tariff announcement from the U.S., the Canadian minister, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he said that his government will continue to defend Canadian workers and businesses in their negotiations with the United States as they work towards that deadline. In a social media post, Carney said that Canada is standing firm in trade talks with the U.S. and will keep defending its workers ahead of the August 1st deadline. Now, he suggested, in fact, he highlighted Canada's efforts to fight fentanyl, and he also talked about his commitment to working with the United States to protect communities. So Carney also noted progress in unifying the Canadian economy, launching major national projects, as well as expanding global trade ties. The Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, is rallying businessmen to back his government if talks with the United States fails. Lula has called the way the tariffs have been announced as disrespectful after the U.S. imposed 50% tariffs on imports from Brazil effective August 1.
He could have called Brazil to tell about the measures he was going to take. He didn't even send a letter. We didn't receive a letter. He posted on his website a complete lack of respect, which is typical of his behavior towards everyone. And I'm not obligated to accept this disrespectful behavior between heads of state.
Further, Lula also said that he was working to unite exporters of orange juice, steel and aerospace to negotiate and find a resolution. Brazil produces nearly half of the world's Arabica coffee and is by far the world's largest orange juice producer, accounting in fact for 80% of global exports.
I myself will seek new markets for Brazilian products. That's my role, including telling business people, let's open new markets together. Because it's not easy for him to just tax others. It will also have consequences in the United States, especially those with the largest export volumes, orange juice, steel, Embraer, which exports heavily to the United States, to talk to see what their situation is. We will try to conduct every possible negotiation process.
Aliado ao governo brasileiro.
The Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will also meet U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington this month to discuss tariffs. In an interview during Manila's top diplomat, he confirmed the arrangement of what will be the first meeting between Trump and Marcos. In fact, the Philippines is concerned over a 20% tariff rate, which was announced by President Trump this week. A White House official earlier said that this meeting was set for July 22, while the office of Marcos said that he will visit the U.S. from July 20 to 22. Top military officials from South Korea, the United States and Japan met in Seoul on Friday. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Kim Myung-soo, his U.S. counterpart Dan Kane, and the Japanese counterpart Yoshida. They, in fact, discussed regional issues and the trilateral military cooperation between them. They also stressed on the importance of security cooperation during the trilateral Chiefs of Defense meeting. In another update, South Korea's Defense Ministry released footage of a joint air drill with Japan and the United States featuring a U.S. B-52H strategic bomber and also fighter jets over international waters on Friday. The first B-52H deployment in the Korean Peninsula this year. This drill aimed to enhance deterrence against North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threats. Thousands of first responders continued searching through thick mud-covered debris in Texas Hill County on Thursday. What they're doing is they're holding out hope of finding survivors 6 days after the flash floods devastated the region and left at least 120 dead. In this tragedy, questions are also being raised now about the delayed response of Texas authorities about this whole thing and how it could have saved lives. Here's the report.
In a catastrophe beyond imagination, more than 120 lives were lost, including dozens of children. Over 170 are still missing, all swept away in the dead of the night. But what still lingers is the exasperation of the families and some questions on whether victims had any warning at all. With U.S. President Donald Trump preparing to visit the disaster zone on Friday with First Lady Melania Trump, new questions have emerged about critical funding that was slashed from emergency preparedness programs. Critics say Trump-era cuts to FEMA and early alert systems left counties like Kerr dangerously exposed, and it was a disaster waiting to happen. Kerr County was the tragedy's epicenter. Kerrville police deflected a question about police radios being unable to communicate with county and emergency officials, hampering rescue efforts as the flood raged.
So I suspect the folks did their job, but I don't know under what circumstances or conditions. A lot of the weather forecast offices now are not operating at full complement of staff, which means that you're really putting an extra burden on these folks.
Local news networks claim that at 4:22 a.m. on July 4th, Kerr County Sheriff's Office got a message from a firefighter upstream to alert residents of the coming flood. The first alert did not reach Kerr County's Code Red system for a full 90 minutes. The delay has raised multiple questions, many which the officials will find hard to answer. Bureau Report, DD India.
Still to come here on DD India Live. Netanyahu says that Hamas must disarm and leave Gaza. UK Prime Minister Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron agree to tighten nuclear cooperation.
Jharkhand will mesmerize you with majestic nature, rich heritage and colorful culture.
Hello. Johar. It fits perfectly.
Thank you.
Full workout ho gaya.
Ready?
Postcards from Jharkhand on National Geographic.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Mark Lynn. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has slammed the foreign media for their reportage on Operation Sindoor. He also confirmed that India successfully hit 13 Pakistani air bases during the operation. He was addressing the 62nd Convocation Day at IIT Madras on Friday. Highlighting the significant role of the youth, he said that as a nation, India faces serious challenges, and it is the responsibility of the youth to find solutions. He emphasized the need to develop indigenous technologies to transform India into a developed country. Doval also said that he was proud of Operation Sindoor on the usage of indigenous content, from BrahMos to radars, as India hit the terror target in Pakistan, precise and to the point. Dismissing claims to the contrary by the foreign media, he asked if there was any imagery of any damage to Indian assets or military installations.
Foreign press and all these things, they said Pakistan did that and this. You tell me one photograph, one imagery. These days, these imageries are from the satellites all over the world. They are this thing, which shows any Indian damage being done, even a glass pane having been torn. They brought out photographs, they wrote this thing, the New York Times put out this thing. Only imagery, they said 13 air bases before 10th May and after 10th May. Whether it was in Sargodha, or it was in Rahim Yar Khan, or it was in Chaklala.
The first meeting of the Governing Council of the National Cadet Corps Alumni Association held on Friday at the Ministry of Defence in New Delhi. Now, this session, it was chaired by the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. He emphasized the importance of harnessing the experiences and values instilled by NCC in nation-building efforts. The Israeli forces are targeting terrorist infrastructure in southern Gaza after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu voiced hope that an agreement with Hamas could be reached within days for a pause in the 21-month conflict. Negotiators from Israel and Palestinian territory, and the Palestinian terrorist group, they have been locked in indirect talks in Qatar since Sunday to try to agree to a temporary ceasefire. Netanyahu said that a lasting truce could follow, but only if Hamas lays down its arms and is no longer able to govern or operate in the Gaza Strip. Britain has reached an agreement with France on a pilot program to return migrants arriving in small boats on Thursday. At a joint press conference, the UK Prime Minister Starmer and the French President Macron announced a one-in, one-out migrant return scheme where UK would send undocumented migrants back to France in exchange for accepting an equal number of legitimate asylum seekers with UK family ties.
I'm pleased to announce our agreement today on a groundbreaking returns pilot. For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks, and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally.
Further, in a landmark move, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the French President Emmanuel Macron took a key step to underpin Europe's security by agreeing to tighten nuclear cooperation as the region frets over the US commitment to its defense and Russian ambitions. In targeting a reboot of defense ties with a focus on joint missile development and nuclear cooperation, while also firming up support for Ukraine in its war with Russia, Europe's two nuclear powers also hope to send a strong signal to Moscow. Some sports updates now. And the Indian pacer Jasprit Bumrah dismissed Joe Root and Ben Stokes early on the second day of the third test to halt England's progress at Lord's on Friday. Root was bowled soon after he completed his 37th Test 100 and a record 8th century at Lord's. The England captain Stokes was also out after adding only 5 runs to his overnight score of 39. England's total has crossed over 330 now as they had resumed play at 251 runs for the loss of 4 wickets. Root and Stokes had added 88 runs for the 5th wicket. The 7-time Wimbledon champion Novak Djokovic bids for Grand Slam history when he faces world number 1 Yannick Sinner in the semi-final on Friday, while defending champion Carlos Alcaraz takes on the 5th seed Taylor Fritz. Djokovic believes his best chance to win a record 25th Grand Slam title lies at the All England club. Djokovic aims to reach an 11th Wimbledon final. Back to his best after a spluttering start in the tournament, Carlos Alcaraz must subdue the power game of the big serving Taylor Fritz to reach his 3rd successive Wimbledon final. The world number 2 is on a 23-match winning streak since losing to Holger Rune in the Barcelona final and has won 34 of his 37 matches on grass. The holy month of Sawan has begun, marking the start of a spiritually significant period in the Hindu calendar. Sawan is dedicated to Lord Shiva and it is marked by devotion, fasting and prayers, especially on Mondays. It's called Sawan Somvar. In fact, on the first day of the Sawan today, devotees offered prayers all across the country to mark the holy festival, which will conclude on the 9th of August. And participating in this spiritual journey, the Kavar Yatra devotees or Kavadiyas, they are as they are called in the local language, they carry sacred Ganga water in a kavad, and this is on their shoulders, symbolizing deep devotion, spiritual austerity and complete surrender to Lord Shiva. We take a look now at the significance of this yatra in this report.
This is not just a journey, nor merely a tradition of offering water. It's a spirit, a soulful resolve that reaches Lord Shiva with every step, every breath, every act of devotion. Legend says that in Satyug, Ravan appeased Lord Shiva by offering sacred Ganga water for his Abhishek. Thus began a tradition of carrying holy Ganga water and offering it at Shiva shrines. Today, millions of Shiva devotees collect Ganga water from holy places like Haridwar, Rishikesh, Gangotri and Gaumukh and carry it back to offer at temples in their hometowns. Thousands walk barefoot for hundreds of kilometers, chanting only one mantra, Bol Bam, Har Har Mahadev. Be it scorching heat or pouring rain, with the Kavars swinging on their shoulders and Shiva's name echoing in their hearts, every step is a vow of surrender. No shoes, no comfort, just unshakable faith that lifts every ounce of fatigue. Each year, crores of devotees participate. In 2024 alone, over 4 crore Kavariyas, 278 rest camps, 25,000 police personnel deployed, 1,200 CCTV cameras and drone surveillance, 200 mobile medical units, 400 plus kilometers of cover paths secured, 10,000 plus sanitation workers serving daily. From government and administration to society, everyone joins in the spirit of service. A stranger offers water to a weary pilgrim. Another lends a hand to someone falling behind. This is not just a pilgrimage. It is a moment when society becomes Shivamay, one with Shiva. The cover carries more than water. It carries faith, sacrifice, and the longing to meet Shiva. Because when Shiva calls, it's not the feet that move, it's devotion that walks. Har Har Mahadev.
Well, that's all we have in this edition of DD India Live. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those of you on the go, get the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app, available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code and download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lin from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.